One autumn afternoon in a quiet cafe nestled at the corner of a quiet street, I overheard an elderly woman, perhaps in her 70s, speak softly to her friend. "He's kind, very kind, but I still don't know if I'm ready to start again." Her words were simple, but they carried something far deeper than hesitation. Because when someone has lived through all the rises and falls of life, the idea of falling in love or marrying again is no longer a quick decision led by emotion. It becomes a quiet journey that calls for deep reflection. At 60, 65, or even 70, remarriage is not uncommon. People find each other again after loss, after heartbreak, or sometimes simply because one morning, as they sit by the window and watch the leaves fall, they feel an unfamiliar emptiness rising inside. Loneliness at this age is not loud. It doesn't come with drama. It lingers quietly, softly, but it runs deep. We all at some point long for a hand to hold, a voice to speak with, a meal that doesn't end in silence. That is why so many begin to consider, maybe one more time, even those who once firmly believed they'd live the rest of their days alone. But stepping into marriage at this stage is nothing like doing so at 30. It's not just about love. It's about finances. It's about adult children. It's about habits and routines that have taken root over decades. It's about memories and the kind of future that looks very different now. Some enter their second marriage full of trust and hope, and they find a peace that feels well-earned. But others realize too late that they didn't truly understand what was changing until life itself began to speak. Remarriage at any age is never wrong. But at this stage, when the path behind you is longer than the road ahead, you deserve to move forward with clarity and calm, not confusion or regret. This message does not try to tell you whether you should marry again. That choice belongs only to you. What it offers instead are 5 quiet truths, honest, sometimes overlooked, that you may want to sit with gently before saying "I do" again. These aren't rules. They're reflections. Things to hold close as you navigate this deeply personal decision, one that's no longer about dreams, but about comfort. Not about building from the ground up, but about finding someone who can walk with you, steadily, kindly, as you continue the rest of the way. 1. When money is no longer just yours. They often say love can't be bought, and that's true. But when you reach the later chapters of life, you begin to see that money isn't something you can place on the sidelines. It becomes part of the foundation, a quiet but essential thread that helps love live in peace. Many older couples step into remarriage with the purest of intentions. We only need each other, they say. Money doesn't matter at our age. But life, especially later in life, is rarely that simple. Because money now is no longer just income. It carries the weight of a lifetime. Pensions, retirement funds, inheritance plans, the home you built. The nest egg you carefully protected for your children or grandchildren. It is not just a number anymore. It is the story of your hard work, your losses, your legacy. Take Thomas, for example, a man of 74 who had lived alone for nearly a decade after losing his wife. Then he met someone, a gentle, book-loving woman he found at a community reading event. They bonded quietly, naturally. He felt ready to open his heart again. And when he decided to remarry, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world, until he learned that by doing so, he would lose access to the survivor benefits from his late wife's Social Security. That income wasn't for him. He had planned to leave it for his granddaughter, the last one in the family still in school. Suddenly, the joy of remarriage collided with an unexpected crossroads, not because he regretted love, but because he hadn't realized how deeply the legal and financial systems were woven into it. That was when Thomas understood marriage isn't just about the heart. It is a legal contract. It has consequences sometimes invisible on your retirement, your taxes, your personal savings, and even your children's or grandchildren's inheritance. Even if you and your partner keep separate accounts, many states have laws that treat marital property as shared once you're legally bound, which means that without a clear agreement, your personal decisions may ripple into places you didn't intend. This isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to honor the life you've built. Because when you've spent decades saving, planning, protecting, your story deserves clarity, not chaos. A healthy marriage in later life doesn't just thrive on affection. It rests on transparency, a mutual respect that extends beyond emotions and into the realm of trust, responsibility, and dignity. So, if you're thinking about saying yes again, make room for an honest conversation about money, and don't be afraid to consult a financial planner. or an attorney who understands retirement and estate law, not because you're suspicious, but because you're wise. Because love at this age should not cost your peace. You're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting your children, your future, and your right to enjoy love without it becoming a quiet burden. 2. When family means more than just two people, love may be something shared between two souls. But marriage, especially in the later chapters of life, rarely belongs to just the couple. When you marry in your 60s or 70s, you're not just stepping into someone's present, you're walking into their history and into the lives that have been built around them for decades. You're stepping into a family that already exists, grown children, grandchildren, longtime friends, and the quiet but powerful presence of someone they loved before you. This isn't like getting married for the first time, when both people begin fresh side by side, with dreams yet to be shaped. Now each of you carries a life suitcase, filled not only with belongings, but with memories, griefs, habits, and deeply rooted relationships. Margaret, a woman of 66, once shared how hopeful she had been about moving in with her new partner, a kind, soft-spoken man who had spent his life as an engineer. She imagined quiet mornings, warm meals, shared walks. What she didn't expect was the resistance from his adult daughter. The young woman didn't dislike Margaret. She wasn't cruel, but she felt that her late mother, who had passed 5 years earlier, was being replaced. Margaret hadn't done anything wrong, but still, she felt out of place, like a guest who had entered a home where the memory of another woman still lived in every corner. This isn't rare. When you remarry someone who already has adult children, you're entering a space where emotions can be tangled, no matter how much love exists. Even grown-ups need time to adjust, and children, even the adult ones, can carry silent fears when they see a parent moving forward without the person they thought would always be there. You can't force someone to embrace your presence, but you can create space for understanding. Be honest. Be gentle. Let them know you're not here to replace. You're here to accompany. You're simply choosing to walk through the rest of your life with someone to talk to at breakfast, to sip tea with in the late afternoon, to hold hands with when the world goes quiet. Love at this age doesn't compete with memories. It complements them. It doesn't erase what came before. It simply offers a little warmth to what still lies ahead. So if you sense tension during holidays, if you hear whispers or feel cold glances, don't meet them with hurt. Meet them with patience, with grace. Over time, your presence may become a quiet comfort, a gentle presence that brings more peace than disruption. Because in truth, you're not there to divide a family. You're there to add a little steadiness to a life that, like yours, has known its share of loss. 3. Love after 60 is not what it was at 30. There's something many people don't expect when stepping into love again later in life. That love after 60 does not come wrapped in the same colors it did at 30. It no longer looks like impulsive dates, late-night phone calls stretching past midnight, or that flutter in your chest when their name lights up your phone. Love now feels more like a quiet river, steady, deep, and sometimes hard to read. By this age, everyone has their rhythms, their routines, their way of folding the morning, of arranging their space, of moving through grief or holding silence. You may prefer mornings filled with stillness and a book. They may turn on the TV just to hear another voice in the room. You might keep everything tidy and structured. They might carry invisible bruises from a past that never quite healed. No one arrives at this stage empty-handed. Everyone brings their own before. And in that, there's both beauty and complexity. Love after 60 doesn't ask for sparks. It asks for stillness, for patience, for the ability to sit with someone and not rush to change them. Some people assume that once you find the right person, everything will fall into place like a second-chance fairy tale. But the truth is, even in love, you can feel lonely sometimes, not because the person isn't good, but because your expectations have changed, because no one can replace what once was, and no one should have to. George, a 70-year-old widower, once said, "I didn't marry again to find a copy of the woman I lost. I married someone completely different, but kind enough to let me read my old poems out loud." And that in many ways is love now. It's not found in grand gestures, but in the way someone brings you tea the way you like it, without asking. In the way they let you sit in silence, without feeling forgotten. So don't search for perfection. Search for peace. Search for presence. Ask each other quietly, how much space do you need to still feel like yourself? What makes you feel seen and cherished? Because maybe you no longer love with fire, but you can love with warmth, with quiet loyalty, with deep listening, with gentle patience, and hands that don't rush to mold, but simply stay open. That too is love. And in many ways, it might be the kind that lasts longest of all. For the legal ties you shouldn't overlook. There's something many of us hesitate to bring up when we talk about love later in life. Legal matters. It sounds cold, unromantic, out of place in a conversation about companionship. But the truth is, one signature on a marriage certificate can quietly shift the shape of the rest of your life. At this age, you're not starting a brand new chapter with a blank page. You're continuing a story that's already full, with property retirement plans, financial commitments, perhaps a will that was written long ago, maybe even a promise you once made to your children, spoken or unspoken, but in the hope of protecting the sweetness of a second chance. Many couples avoid these conversations altogether. They say we love each other. That's what matters. And yes, love matters, but so does clarity, because the law does not operate on feelings. It operates on documents, on default rules, on silence. Imagine this. You remarry believing all is well, then suddenly a health emergency, and in that moment, the person with legal authority to make medical decisions for you may no longer be your child, but your new spouse. Not out of anyone's ill will, but because no one thought to ask the hard questions in advance. That's what happened to Eleanor, a 67-year-old woman from Vermont. She had 3 adult children and a house left to her by her late husband. When she remarried, no one spoke about revisiting the will. It didn't seem urgent until she fell seriously ill. Her new husband believed the house should be sold to cover hospital costs. Her children understandably believed it still belonged to their family. What followed wasn't a family disagreement. It was a legal dispute, one filled with pain that could have been avoided. If only someone had said, "Let's talk about this." That's why these conversations matter. It's not about doubting your partner. It's about respecting what each of you has built before each other and choosing to walk forward, not just with love, but with care. Meet with a lawyer. Revisit your will. Talk about power of attorney, about healthcare decisions, about what would happen if you were no longer able to speak for yourself. A prenuptial agreement might not sound romantic, but it's an act of protection, of peace, of clarity. It's not the opposite of love. It's what keeps love from becoming tangled in fear or conflict when life throws something unexpected your way. Because at this stage, you don't want surprises. You want understanding, and real love can hold that kind of honesty. If remarrying after 60 is not starting over, it's choosing a gentler way to live. Turning 60 doesn't mean starting over, nor does it mean you're at the end. It's a place in life where you begin to understand more clearly than ever what brings you peace and what no longer deserves your energy. Remarrying at this age isn't about fantasy anymore. It's not about being swept off your feet or building a life from scratch. It's about understanding, about choosing carefully. It's about gratitude for what has been and a quiet hope that someone might walk with you, not to conquer the world, but to simply share what remains with kindness and ease. Of course, that choice may come with real questions, financial conversations, legal papers, family dynamics, old habits, grief that still lingers, and a new rhythm that must be found gently, without forcing anything. You may need to learn how to live with someone new, without erasing the memories of someone gone. You may find that love now doesn't ask for commitment in the way it once did, but asks instead for understanding, patience, and presence. Frank, who once dreamed of romantic companionship after retirement, eventually learned that happiness didn't come from constantly being together. It came from knowing that someone was nearby, close enough to share, but far enough to still breathe. So many people remarry to avoid loneliness, but then realize that too much togetherness can be just as heavy, not because anyone is wrong, but because two fully formed lives with years of habits and personal space don't always merge perfectly. And that's okay. At this age, happiness doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, in a shared glance, in a hand reaching for yours during a slow walk, in the way someone asks softly, "Did you sleep well?" and means it. But to find that peace, you must be honest with yourself. Do you want full togetherness or just a gentle presence? Are you willing to let go of solitude? Or is your freedom something you've come to treasure? There is no wrong answer. There's only your answer, the one that fits your heart at this moment in your life. Don't say yes because you're afraid of being alone. But don't say no just because you're afraid things might get complicated. Marry if it brings you peace, if their presence helps you breathe easier, if their voice makes the silence feel less sharp, if when you're with them the days feel shorter and the nights more restful, and when the world grows quiet, if your heart still whispers, "I want someone beside me," then listen, not to others, not to fear, just to yourself. Walk forward slowly, with a little caution, a little hope, and all the gentleness you've earned through the years. Because this time, love isn't about chasing something new. It's about choosing something calm, something honest, something quietly beautiful in the time you still have.